All right. Hi, everybody. We are going to talk about adverbs today, adverbial clauses, not just adverbs, but adverbial clauses. So please have your grammar book. If you don't have your grammar book, just in case, I do have, if you look at the screen here, the pages here on the screen so you can look on with me. It's not ideal, but it can be helpful, I guess, if you don't have it. So get your grammar book. You can pause me if you need to. And we're going to start on page 52. All right, let's talk about adverbial clauses. So, first of all, Grammar Monster is a really fun website that you can go to. I also like Grammar Girl. She's pretty fun too. They're very helpful. They break things down really clearly. So, good link to have. I'll make sure that I link that in our folder for today, which is Tuesday. So, first of all, let's understand what a clause is, right? Remember that a clause has a subject and a verb, but that doesn't mean that it's a complete independent sentence. A clause has to have a subject and a verb. So, for example, if I said, I eat, that's a clause or a sentence, right? But there are dependent clauses as well, and those often begin with what we call subordinating clauses or subordinating conjunctions. Oh my God. So when, because, if, as, although, those kinds of things. Those are dependent. So if I just said, although she eats, you'd be like, what? So those are dependent clauses. Still has a subject and a verb, she eats, but is dependent on another clause, an independent clause, to complete it or to complete the thought. All right, so we've got the clause, subject, verb, and we've got adverbial, which means that it modifies a verb, could modify an adjective, could modify an adverb within the sentence. Most of the time, it's a verb for the most part, but I will show you that often you can tell when it's something when it's not a verb. I'll explain that to you in just a moment. And here's how we do it. If we take a look at what they're answering, okay, when it's adverbs, they're answering when, where, how, and a couple of other things that I'm going to take you through in just a minute. We ask, what is this answering, right? So if we look at this first example under adverbs of time, it says, after the game has finished, the king and pawn go into the same box. After the game has finished answers, when do they go? So that is how it is modifying go. All right. Let's look at this one. I stopped believing in Santa Claus when my mother took me to see him in a department store. Oh, sad. And he asked for my autograph. That's pretty funny. That's funny. He asked for my autograph. Oh. When my mother took me to see him in a department store is when she stopped believing. Okay, so it modifies the verb. All right. As soon as you trust yourself, you will know how to live. When you will know, the verb know, so it's modifying know, is as soon as you learn to trust yourself. All right. So some of them answer when. Notice that the subordinating conjunctions that begin those clauses are things like after, as soon as, before, when. Yay, that's easy. Answers when. Until, while, all of that good stuff. Okay, we'll go over those in your book in just a minute. Adverbs of place, where. So any kind of conjunction that mentions where. Anywhere, everywhere, where, wherever. Anywhere the struggle is great, the level of ingenuity and inventiveness is high. Where is it high? Where is it high? Anywhere the struggle is great. So that modifies the verb is. Where is it? I will tell the truth wherever I please. That's the next sentence there. Where will you tell the truth? Wherever you please. Where will you tell? Wherever. All right. So where, tell is what's being modified there. How works as well. Those often begin with as, like, or the way. He acts like it is a joke. How does he act? Like it's a joke. You talk at me the way a teacher talks to a student. How do you talk to me? The way a teacher talks. I feel as young as I ever did. How do I feel as young? All right. Now, there are other ones. Comparison is actually a pretty common subordinate clause or adverbial clause. A vacuum is a hell of a lot better than some of the stuff that nature replaces it with. Well, there's a lot going on there that I don't want to talk about. But what to what degree is it better than some of the stuff that nature replaces it with? So when it's comparison, it's usually modifying an adjective or an adverb. Okay, it's how is it better? Better than, or what degree is it better than this? He is as smart as he is tall. Um, so to what degree is he smart? The same degree as he is tall. All right. She is not so bright as she thinks she is. To what degree is she bright? Not so. If you look at that, right? All right. So adverbs of reason, because, given, or since. So that's sometimes that since is used that when it's not time, but a reason. I don't have a bank account because I don't know my mother's name. So why don't you have it? Because. Since you are like no other being ever created, you're incomparable. Why are you incomparable? Since you're not like no other being. There's also if then. So a lot of times if you see a subordinate clause that starts with an if, it's going to be an adverbial clause. All right. So if the facts don't fit the theory, change the facts. Why are we changing the facts? Because of this. So it's that if then condition that you're looking for. And then there are also these adverbs of concession, though, although, even though, while, whereas, even if. So although golf was originally restricted to wealthy, today it's open. A loud voice cannot complete with a clear voice, even if it's a whisper. All right. Although I'm not an expert in grammar, I can figure it out and try to help you guys through this. Okay. So in spite of. All right. A couple of things about an adverbial clause. An adverbial clause, when it says as an adjunct, that just means that it is not necessary to the sentence to make sense. Okay, so if we look back up here, if you look at the part of the sentence that is not the adverbial clause, today it's open to anybody who owns hideous clothing, that still makes sense. Okay, so that adverbial clause is not necessary for the sentence to make sense. It's a dependent clause, like we said earlier, can't stand on its own. I can't just say even if it's a whisper. You'd be like, what you talking about? It usually begins with a subordinated conjunction, although, because, if, until, when. Since, when, although, because, if, SWABI, swabby. That's a good way to remember that those are adverbial clauses. Since, when, although, because, if. Now there are lots more, but those are pretty common ones. All right. So swabby, SWABI, is one way to remember that subordinating conjunction that will begin a dependent clause that usually is an adverbial clause. And then finally, the subject and the verb. As all clauses contain the subject and the verb, right? Now, one more thing about using commas. The basic rule of thumb is this. If the adverbial phrase comes first in the sentence, you need a comma. If the adverbial phrase comes last in a sentence, you do not need a comma. So take a look at these two examples. Where there are too many soldiers, there is no peace. Where there are too many lawyers, there is no justice. Now, I hope you're also noticing the parallel structure there, right? Am I right? Now, if I were to say there is no peace where there are too many soldiers, I do not need a comma there. All right, the comma is when the adverbial clause is in the front of the sentence. All right, let's take a look at the next example. There is no peace where there are too many soldiers. Well, we just did, yeah, that's what I'm just showing you right there. All right, so let's go to your book and let's take what we've just kind of gone over, and I know I went over it really quickly, but we'll put it into practice, on your book, and we'll see what we got. Okay. So I will put this up, and what I'd love for you to do right now is go ahead and, as soon as I'm finished telling you how many to do, hit pause and let's see how you do just on your own for right now. What I'd like you to do on page 52 is the first 5. And what it asks you to do, Actually, don't do number 1. My apologies. Don't do number 1. Do 2 through 6 because number 1 is they made a mistake and it's messed up. Do 2 through 6. And what it asks you to do is decide what is being modified. All right. Now, the other thing I want you to be thinking about is what is the question it's answering? Okay. Or what kind of adverb is it? Like, is it conditional? Is it an if then adverb? Okay. So go ahead and pause and do 2 through 6 right now. Okay. So I hope that went well. Let's go over those answers. All right. So if you drive tomorrow, I will drive tonight. This is simply one of those swabbies. An if means that it's going to be a dependent clause, and it's almost always going to modify the verb because it's a condition. I will do something on a condition of something. So what is being modified here? Will drive. I will drive if you drive tomorrow. I will drive tonight. Notice the comma because it's in the beginning. If you drive tomorrow, comma, I will drive tonight. If we turn that around, I will drive tonight. If you drive tomorrow, we do not need the comma. All right. A date palm cannot grow unless its roots are in water. This is another condition. So we have a condition if, and now we have a condition unless. So unless its roots are in water, comma, a date palm cannot grow would be if we switch those. So remember the commas, where they go. So what is being modified there? Cannot grow. Okay. What's the condition that it needs to grow in? Unless its roots are in water. So that's the condition of the growing. Okay, I hope that makes sense. An ostrich can run faster than any bird does. Now, this is another good example of how the comparison is almost always going to modify some kind of adjective or adverb. So what's being modified here is faster. Okay, what is being done than any other bird does? Faster. Okay, that's the comparison. All right. So when you see a than, usually what's being modified is the look for an adverb or an adjective. Okay. All right. Number 5, the beaches of Bermuda are pink because rose-colored shells wash ashore. This one's a little difficult. At least I thought it was kind of difficult. Now this answers why. Why are they? Why are they? So that's why R is A. Okay. After Cortez reached Mexico City, he was met by Montezuma. When was he met? After. So was met is what is being modified, and it's telling us when he was met, which is after. All right. So I hope that went pretty well for you guys. If we look at again the commas, you can see that when the clause is in front, you need comma. When it's in back, you do not. So take a look at those examples of how that works. Okay. I'll pop if you want to practice and do 7 through 12, go for it, and then I'll give you the answers. All right. So the answer to number 7 is can play. When can they play? When they're trained. The answer to number 8 is larger. Again, remember that comparison than is usually going to do the adverb or adjective there. So larger. It sets. Oh, no, actually, it's earlier when winter arrives. No, it sets. The sun sets earlier when winter arrives. When does it set? When does it set? No, earlier. Earlier is when it sets. When winter arrives is when it sets earlier. So it's earlier that's being modified there. When, earlier. When is it? Earlier. Hope that makes some sense. Sorry about that. Before I get dressed, when do I listen? All right, so listen is the answer there. Since the bus was late, I walked. So remember that since is a key swabby. So we know that that's the adverbial clause there. And walked, why did I walk? Because the bus was late, since it was late. Walked. And then since falcons usually live on cliff tops, they adjust. Why do they adjust? Because they usually live on cliff tops. All right. So If you're having major issues with these, let me know. Let's skip this page and go to 54. Go to page 54. And what I want you to pay attention to now is the comma use. So first thing you'll want to do is underline the adverbial clauses in the paragraph. So do that first. And then I want you to decide, does it need a comma or does it not? And just remember the rule. All right, so go ahead and pause and do that really quickly. And then we'll see how you do when you come back. Okay, so here we go. Here are the adverbial clauses. Before, cutting tools were made of copper and bronze. That's the first one. Before tells us when, all right? And therefore, it's an adverbial clause. And we're going to need a comma there, right? Because it begins the sentence. If it said they were made of flint before cutting tools were made of copper and bronze, we would not need a comma. But we do because it comes first. Because it could be shaped easily is the next adverbial clause. And we need a comma there too. Next adverbial clause is when they hunted. We do not need a clause or a comma there. If it was in the beginning of the sentence, when they hunted, earlier people used sharp flint knives, then we would. Next adverbial clause, even though metal knives can be purchased anywhere, and then we need a comma. Next one is the last one. Because it can take a year or more to become skilled enough to fashion a usable spear or knife, and that does not need a comma because it ends the sentence. It doesn't begin the sentence. All right. Let's take a look at exercise B really quickly. We'll just do this one together, and then I'll let you guys go. When a starfish captures an oyster, that's an adverbial clause. And we need a comma after oyster. Even though the sea anemone looks like a flower, it is a flesh-eating animal. That first clause is a dependent adverbial clause, and the comma is exactly correct. This flower, if it needs to, can move along the ocean bottom. Now, this is kind of new. If it needs to is the adverbial clause, and it's in the middle. So what do you think? Are we going to need commas to set that off? Yes. This flower, comma, if it needs to, comma, can move along the ocean bottom. Next one, because it is covered with sharp spines, comma. Its spines protect it when it is attacked is the adverbial clause, no comma. The tail of a seahorse, when the seahorse wraps it around a piece of seaweed, becomes a handy anchor. You can tell just by the way I'm reading it where we're going to need the comma, right? The adverbial clause, when the seahorse wraps it around a piece of seaweed. Okay, that's the adverbial clause. So we need a comma after seaweed. And then the seahorse, because it looks like a tiny horse, is well named. Comma behind horse, because it looks like a tiny horse, is our adverbial clause. And then finally, humpback whales feed at the surface when they are hungry. What's the adverbial clause there? When they are hungry. Correct punctuation, because it is at the end of the sentence. If we took when they are hungry and put it at the beginning of the sentence, we would need a comma. So it would read like this. When they are hungry, comma, humpback whales feed at the surface. Yeah, that's it, period. All right, so go over this again if you need to. I'll put the link to the Grammar Monster page as well so that you can go over that. For some of you, going over it yourself might be really easy for you or might work really well. And take the quiz. It's 8 questions, 16 points. Let me know if you have any trouble as you're going through with things. If I see that we still need work on this, we'll continue on this, okay? All right, hope everyone's doing great. I know e-learning can be super stressful. At least it is for all of us. Out. Here we go. All right. Okay, bye everyone.